With the new 2023-24 football season about to kick off, here's the Gadabout United preview to the next 9 or 10 months ahead and how we've prepared for it close season, including friendlies, transfers, personnel, expectations and predictions. But first things first, let's begin with a recap of the season just gone. It's safe to say that Ten Hag exceeded the vast majority of United fans' expectations with improved performances on the pitch, the league finish and the first silverware being taken back to Old Trafford for 6 long years. It was an iffy start, but the new boys of Martinez, Erik and Casemiro soon found their feet. Malacia and to a lesser extent Anthony needed a little longer to fully bed in after both making promising starts. The first phase of the removal of the previous regime's perceived deadwood really galvanised the squad, that and the strict discipline enforced by the Dutchman. While the league gradually slipped away as the season went on, it didn't prevent us taking wins against all of the so-called Big Six, but our away form against clubs that resided in the top half of the table did cost us. Nevertheless, Champions League football was assured with a deserved third place finish, and the boss showed his mindset as we were involved in all of the knockout competitions we'd been competing in till the second half of April. A Carabao League Cup win was the glorious reward, but losing the Derby FA Cup final did hurt. Regardless, it was a very satisfying campaign, with great strides made from the start up to the finish, with players like Bruno Fernandes, Marcus Rashford, Diogo Dalot and Aaron Wan-Bissaka all having arguably their best seasons in a United shirt, with a host of others like Luke Shaw really rediscovering their form. So all in all, that's given the Dutchman and his staff a great platform to kick on this season. Whilst they overachieved last term, with most of my Facebook group believing that the chance of silverware was remote in the previous campaign and Europa League qualification was as good as we could expect. So we really still need to keep our ambitions to a realistic level, whatever that means. But we are Manchester United Football Club, and the so-called experts from every branch of the media will be critical if we're not leading the league from start to finish, whilst making a concerted effort to win the quadruple. And then there are the swathes of our own support, of a certain age and intelligence, who manifest on social media and will be giving their inexperienced and blockable opinions of why we're underperforming and losing games we should win. Now moving on to the friendlies. Once again, the results of these games are unimportant, but how we played and what the boss wanted to try out is. And despite losing a few, we never looked really poor. Lacklustre maybe, but not poor. Take into account that in most of these matches, especially stateside, we made 11 changes at half-time and even put out a junior side against Wrexham. The most important thing is that within these games, the squad gains fitness, solidifies bonds and incurs few or no injuries. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case for young midfielder Kobbie Mainoo, who looked very promising with his maturity and play, but was injured in that defeat to Real Madrid within the opening minutes. Other players like Alejandro Garnacho, for instance, looked to be chomping at the bit to get the new campaign underway. This especially looked like the case in the last more competitive match against Lens, where Ten Hag had put out what seemed to be his first choice 11, barring Højlund of course. Now moving on to the league fixtures, which predated the start of the pre-season coming out in June, we have a welcome opening day fixture at home to Wolves. That's followed by both North London clubs within 2 of the next following 3 matches, before playing the Old Trafford Manchester Derby on the 28th of October. We then have a tough December with Newcastle, Chelsea and the old enemy, Liverpool in the first half of that month. There will be a fortnight's winter break in the second half of January. The Etihad version of the Manchester Derby is in early March, and then the matches are then less predictable, as a number will be rearranged due to fixture clashes depending upon cup progression or even the weather. We have a tough April with the return matches against Chelsea, Newcastle, Liverpool all coming up then, along with Arsenal in May. However, only Chelsea from these matches will be away from Old Trafford. On to one of the most interesting and crucial parts of the pre-season, the transfer ins and outs. Starting with the outs, no fewer than 15 players have been released from the squad or youth side so far this summer as I'm recording this. And there are still just under 4 weeks of the transfer window to go. And further to that, it still looks very possible that Donny van de Beek, Fred, Maguire and McTominay, the latter two already having bids from West Ham received and rejected, could all be shown the exit by then. But as a whole, a significant loss for the ones that we had purchased from that selection. The biggest heavyweight released, and sadly for us on a free, was United goalkeeping legend David De Gea. There'd been supposed negotiations for many weeks about having the Spaniard stay on, with a reduction on his salary of $375,000 a week, the then highest at the club. But that would also come with him playing second string to an incoming replacement. An agreement couldn't be reached. Injury-plagued veteran Phil Jones was released on a free to an outpouring of what seemed to be genuine support from Reds on social media. I found this personally a tad surprising, considering that it had been the target for a variety of attacks from mockery to abuse, especially from our own supporters. Young Swedish winger Anthony Elanga went for the biggest incoming transfer fee so far, 15 million quid from Nottingham Forest. Alex Telles, who'd been on loan at Sevilla last season and won the Europa League, moved on for a token few £1 million to Ronaldo's Al Nassr club in Saudi Arabia at just 30 years of age, and joined one of the many in this transfer window throughout Europe who've sold their soul for a big payday. Another once seemingly good prospect, Axel Tuanzebe, also left on a free. A slew of youth players left, with Zidane Iqbal and Ethan Laird being the most surprising departures, along with Charlie Savage and keeper Nathan Bishop amongst others. Now to the other side and the players coming in, we've had a second successive summer, arguably a third, of bringing in high quality players. First in on the 5th of July was 24-year-old Chelsea midfielder Mason Mount for £55 million plus up to £5 million in add-ons. This technically very gifted and hard-working midfielder is perfect for how the boss wants to play. He can score goals and create, with excellent finishing at times. He's also very good from dead ball situations, taking corners, free kicks and even penalties when called upon. Further, he knows much of the United squad very well from his England duty, including Shaw, Maguire and Rashford. He has a good temperament with no baggage or ego. He is humble and easily made up with Martinez after their run-in last season. He will undoubtedly flourish in a dressing room, buzzing with positivity and solid work ethic. The most surprising incoming play was next through the doors at Old Trafford, as former United centre-back Johnny Evans, at the age of 35, was weirdly re-signed on a short-term pre-season contract. However, it may be extended to a year as cover, possibly subject to Maguire's future at the club. The Cameroon international Andre Onana was next in, signing on the 20th of July from Inter Milan for £47.2 million. Onana worked under Ten Hag for over 5 years, and so is another one reunited with the boss. He played with Anthony at Ajax, but far more importantly the Butcher, which should help him synchronise with the defence more quickly. As you probably know, the former Ajax man is an attack-minded sweeper keeper, possessing great footwork and distribution skills. He has good range of passing and is very comfortable and confident on the ball, which is obviously important to Ten Hag in the style he wants to play. Despite being the club's new number 1, he'll take the number 24 jersey due to the fact he was born on the 2nd of April. And finally, he apparently didn't get on with his Cameroon coach, Rigobert Song, and his tactics, and so made the strange decision to retire from the national team after just 34 appearances at the age of 26 in December 2022. This is very much to our advantage, obviously, as the 6'3" keeper can rest during the international break and obviously can't get injured playing for his country. The final major signing made so far this summer is 20-year-old striker Rasmus Højlund. The Dane joined from Atalanta for £72 million. An out-and-out striker was all too obvious the main thing missing from the side last year, a dedicated goal scorer, and he happens to be a massive United fan to boot. However, the 6'3" marksman is still developing and is not the finished article, so maybe a little bit of patience will be required for the start of his Old Trafford career, which will not begin straight away, as he'll be injured for the first game at least. With just under a month left, there are still strong indications that Fiorentina's defensive midfielder, Sofiane Amrabat, could well be on his way to United too. The Moroccan is a proper box-to-box midfielder and will help bolster the defence and support the attack. He doesn't take any prisoners, and if recruited would almost certainly be the death knell of McFred, adding petrol to the fire on their departure rumours. Onto the team, and before anything, a big talking point, the captaincy. This has been a major issue for fans and probably his own teammates ever since Maguire was given the armband by Ollie and subsequently failed to live up to it. There was the possibility that at the beginning of his tenure the boss would relinquish Maguire of that responsibility, but instead allowed him to try and hold on to it. But after earning just 16 starts and 15 cameo sub-appearances last season, the Man United skipper of 3 years has finally been stripped of the honour in favour of his stand-in last term vice-captain Bruno Fernandes. I don't think any Reds were upset or surprised by this, although some did fancy Casemiro or one of 2 or 3 other options ahead of the Portuguese. Now to the squad itself. As mentioned previously, we have a new keeper, Ten Hag's old charge from his Ajax days, Andre Onana. You'll have to get used to the fact that Onana will position himself further up the field than De Gea, as he has good control and passing, with the aim of being able to start attacks quickly with his pinpoint distribution. If he turns out to be another Rene Higuita, I'll start to worry, but until that moment I have confidence in Ten Hag's faith in him. The defence hasn't really been strengthened that much, perhaps due to Maguire's unwillingness to go quietly, but instead to work to try and win his place back. So, as previously mentioned as well, we've re-signed Johnny Evans, because if the old skipper does go, it could be within the death throes of the transfer window, so we don't want to be left in the lurch without defensive cover. I think that the manager has full confidence in the back line, with his first choice back four and their rotational backups. Mason Mount's introduction has obviously strengthened the midfield, which means a further creative hub and a source of goals. Like the whole Chelsea squad, he was poor last year, but in a setup replete with confidence and dedication, I expect a lot from him now he's going to be wearing red on a regular basis. He's a quality player and could start ahead of Eriksen, with the Swede being in rotation. I can't speculate too much, but if we get Amrabat, I do foresee a definite improvement in our points tally this time around, which has already seen a big increase on the year before, in the last campaign. On the wings, there'll be a ton of competition. Obviously, Rashford will start on the left, that's a given. But Sancho, Garnacho, Antony and Amad Diallo, back from an impressive loan move at Sunderland last season, are all going to battle for that right wing berth. Albeit Sancho has been playing up front pre-season, so he could become cover in attack for Højlund. Up front, there'll be lots of hope and expectations on the new boy Rasmus Højlund's young shoulders, with Martial being the cover if fit. I can't see Greenwood playing any part. I'm surprised he's not gone on loan this season, or better still, moved on completely. On to our opponents, and the main opposition are the usual suspects. Obviously City will be the team to beat, as they've removed some of their first teamers but still managed to strengthen anyway. They do hold the 3 major trophies, tainted or not. Liverpool, for the second successive season, have been or are currently underwhelming in the transfer market. Most of their veterans have sold their souls to Saudi and moved on for a massive payday, whilst McAllister, the Argentine World Cup winner from Brighton, has been their most notable signing. I'm not trying to be biased, but they could well struggle again this season and fall out of the top 4. Arsenal have consolidated their solid squad with over £200 million spent on 3 players, with the majority of the money laid out on Declan Rice. They'll be a tough prospect, but do they have the leadership to reprise a title challenge, or was last season a fluke? Chelsea are in transition and have been doing a lot of strange business with many of their squad going to Saudi, a nation who happen to be a shareholder in their club, as despite spending almost £200 million strengthening new manager Maurizio Pochettino's squad, they're still in a net surplus. They should challenge for 4th, but probably know better. Newcastle haven't strengthened as much as I thought they would, and maybe it's because their manager is happy with his squad, although I'm a bit more cynical, believing that the Saudi owners don't think that Eddie Howe is high enough profile for them anymore, and will look to sack him before the end of autumn if they're not flying high enough. And to Spurs, no, I'm not going to bother mentioning them and waste everyone's time. As for the rest, Villa have been touted to make a surge up the table this season, and maybe at least challenge for the Europa League spot, so keep your eye on them. Now for the competition targets and predictions. Again, as I mentioned earlier, we overachieved last year, with few Reds believing that we'd come 3rd, but that doesn't prevent expectations for this season, especially with our new signings being inflated. I think that in the league, a Champions League spot is a given more than a target this time around, and Ten Hag's boys will be judged on how far they can push City to the league title, and perhaps another side, maybe Arsenal, Liverpool, Chelsea, also to stake a claim. Newcastle will want to retain their top 4 place, but unless they buy big, I think they'll fall short of those lucrative spots. Beyond the rivals already mentioned, I really can't see anyone else in the mix. As for winning it, I think we'll close the gap on City, but they will still be favourites for a reason, going for their 4th title in a row. It would be heart over head to think we will win it. If we get Amrabat, maybe even a good backup striker for Højlund, we could run our tainted City rivals very close or better. Into Europe, and we're back in the Champions League and would expect to at least get out of the group in the knockout stage of the competition. Depending upon the draw, I expect the quarterfinals, and I guess that's the boss's minimum target from the board too. Domestically, our progress is going to be very much dependent on the kind of draws we get and a bit of luck. We got a higher than average number of cup matches at home last season. I doubt history will repeat itself this time around. As I said before, what I do know is that Ten Hag will go wholeheartedly for every piece of silverware available and will not overly rotate his squad unless injuries force him to, or we're drawn against weaker lower league opposition. I'd like to see another final. Let's see. So there you have it, the Gadabout United preview of the 2023-24 season. What are your hopes for this campaign, and what do you think of my predictions and expectations? Make a comment below and like, share and subscribe. As always, thank you for your support.